hoping for a Dead Space 2 remake next, others clamoring for an entirely new chapter, yet others who've begun talking about a spin-off, VR titles or anthology experiences. Many of these discussions revolve around the idea that Dead Space 4 might be a long-term goal rather than an immediate next step, especially if Motive Studios and EA prioritize other large projects first. Some fans even speculate that future Dead Space entries could be handled to another studio if EA decides to focus on its more popular franchises. So, while passion's high, there's no timeline, brochure, or development roadmap publicly circulating from EA itself, at least not yet. Why this matters? Legacy and mechanics. We think it's worth reflecting on why a Dead Space 4 would be such a big deal. The original trilogy, culminating with Dead Space 3, built a legacy of these relentless atmospheres, intelligent horror design, and resource-scarce survival elements. Unlike many shooting games, Dead Space didn't make combat easy. It made every encounter an exercise in tension, inventory management, and risk evaluation. When the 2023 remake arrived, it validated that the world, the sound design, the zero-gravity movements, and everything else still has emotional power. And that made many believe that continuing the story or even expanding the universe could be a defining moment for horror games in this generation. But translating that into Dead Space 4 means building on a legacy that earned cult status while also answering modern expectations. Today's horror games demand more than static corridors and jump scares. They require storytelling with emotional depth, world building that rewards exploration, and of course systems that make every moment feel like survival is fragile and precious. If a sequel ever gets greenlit, it'll need to honor sort of all of that and then push it even further. One of the biggest hurdles Dead Space 4 faces is not creative, it's actually commercial, because while the remake was critically praised, there is indication that it might not have hit EA's internal sales benchmarks. This is important because publishers often link future development decisions to visible market performance. If the remake performance wasn't strong enough to next-gen consoles and PC, it can make executives hesitate to fund a speculative sequel. This is a recurring theme with franchises that haven't had sequels in a long time. A successful remake gets the hype, but if publishers don't see the long-term revenue potential, sequels don't always materialize. So where does that leave us? Here's the honest summary based on all the evidence so far. Dead Space 4 is not beneficially confirmed, obviously, by EA or any other studio. There's no production slate, the press release, or development announcement from the publishers. Original creators want it to happen. Glenn Schofield and others have said they're actively exploring the possibility and trying to generate interest. That doesn't guarantee a project, but it's the strongest signal in years that someone in the industry is pushing for it. EA's current strategy seems cautious. Reports suggest that the franchise is not currently prioritized, and EA may be focusing on other major properties instead. The community's excitement, however, is very real. Fans continue to theorize. Design mock-ups, deliberate narrative possibilities are all signs that the demand is alive, even if the project isn't greenlit. There's a pathway, but it ain't straightforward. A sequel might eventually happen as part of a resurgence, a deal with another studio maybe, or a shift in EA's long-term strategy. Every great horror franchise seems to hit a crossroad at some point. Sometimes they return bigger than ever, other times they fade quietly, only to be rediscovered and revived decades later. Dead Space is in that exact place right now. Fans are reminded the industry that the deep corridors, the terrifying necromorphs, tactical dismemberment combat still resonate in 2026. Creators have said they want to continue the story. The franchise exists in a cultural space where its influence shows up in games, books, podcasts, even graphic novel. So whether Dead Space 4 ever becomes a reality isn't guaranteed, but the conversation around it is far from over. Every interview, every insider comment, every fan theory keeps the potential alive because horror doesn't die quietly, it lingers. Right now, so does Dead Space.